Hi everyone. Hi people.
Hello.
I am Joan Amek from Women's Foundation. Allow me to read my presentation because I feel like if I talk, I'm going to waste the time. But thank you for holding space for this conversation and for Alex to put it together. We try to organize this weeks and weeks and weeks and trying to have the perfect conversation for us to still be radical, but also for us to still be accepted in this space. My name is Joan Amek. I am the founder and director at Women's Foundation, an organization that uses entrepreneurship to solve community emergencies. And these emergencies include homelessness, financial dependence, access to services, healthcare services, and also access to legal aid services. And we do this through intersections of exclusion, survival, resistance, and use, and also with the politics and the climate and the political climate that we are in. Our work centers lesbians, bisexuals, and queer and diverse people in the context where existence alone is criminalized, erased, and politicized. When we talk about humanitarianism, about inclusion, about accountability, I want to begin by asking, included by what? And also accountable to whom? In Uganda, we are not just responding to humanitarian needs created by political systems, disaster, conflict, or poverty. We are also trying to navigate the polycrisis, political repression, legal backlash, social stigma, and structural neglect, all happening simultaneously and disproportionately while impacting the most marginalized. For example, when the Anti-Homosexuality Act was passed in Uganda in 2023, very many LGBTIQ people were forcibly evicted, denied healthcare, and lost their jobs and even went into hiding. I believe some embassies have even received a lot of asylum seekers. These were humanitarian crises. But because of who we are and how we represent ourselves, many of us were silenced, and many of us in this room were silent. Funding dried up, partners hesitated, aid actors said they could not engage. Apparently it's a political reason or a political issue. Uganda is a country where a humanitarian sector needs to intersect the state-sponsored hostility and structurally marginalized groups, where LGBTIQ human beings also need to have a seat at the table. At Chola Women's Foundation, we work with LBQ women who are not only ignored in national crisis emergency responses, but also are actively targeted by the harmful policies. Just in 2024, last year in December, a directive from the Prime Minister called to the investigation and potential deregistration of our organization. Based on solely fabricated allegations, we talked about miscommunication, misinformation, and the effect it has on to our work today. Promoting homosexuality was apparently what our work was doing. That is why it was supposed to be deregistered. This is not just a political challenge, it is a humanitarian emergency. But guess what? Survival is for the fittest in this sector. Humanitarian action should be neutral in the face of injustice. We cannot continue to treat inclusion like a checklist or a potential add-on. It must be embedded in how we define crises and in who must lead the response. These actions expose deeper systematic flaws in humanitarianism. The failure to center those most at risk in practice of inclusion, often we see tokenism, soiled into the panels of one-off projects, while real decision-making remains top to down, disconnected from the lived realities. At the Rela Women's Foundation, now the approach that we are using, at Rela Women's Foundation, we use feminist leadership. This means grounding everything we do in care, community, and collective power. It also means challenging the systems that treat our lives as too political to be protected. At Trela Women's Foundation, we respond by building community-led systems of care, safe housing, emergency, referral support, healing spaces, and also feminist livelihood programs. We do this while constantly adapting to the shrinking spaces, digital surveillance, and threats of criminalization. Because in Uganda, if you fall doing this work, you have 14 years in prison. Our feminist leadership model is rooted in collective power, trust, and accountability to the LGBTQ women in our country. We do not have the luxury to wait for formal systems to recognize us. We'll pull that seat at the table. So we have created alternatives. But we also deserve to be at the table, shaping those systems. In response to the increased threats, we have managed to secure a safe house, a temporary safe house for protection and funded by an emergency feminist grant, which is Frida Fund. We took down very many publications on our social media platforms because of the directive from the Prime Minister, and we also managed to engage legal support groups to establish and create security protocols for us as we do this work. But more than that, we have continued to listen. We prioritize mental health, we reimagine safety, and we also ensure that our community-led practices are the way that people want us to respond. Feminist leadership in the humanitarian action means staying rooted in community, even when the systems fail us. And yet, when global funding, policy conversations, and the humanitarian architecture are designed, we are actually still outside the room. So what does it truly mean to address systematic barriers? It means recognizing that those most excluded must be centered not just as beneficiaries, but as architects of the humanitarianism. It means donors and agencies showing up not just as funding agencies, but with courage to stand in solidarity. To those who are most at risk, especially when it's inconvenient or politically sensitive. So what does it also mean? What does accountability mean in this context? It's not just reporting frameworks or donor dashboards. It is not who gets to be safe or who gets to lead, and whose needs shape response priorities. We need to move from inclusion as a checkbox to inclusion as a foundation of the work that we do in this movement. From token presence to shared power, from security conversation to rather having principled courage on how do we show up together, and that means catering for those whose lives lead at the intersections of multiple crises, just like the LGBTIQ human beings in countries where the AHA has been passed, not as recipients of aid, but as architects of the humanitarian systems that are just, accountable, and truly responsive. And lastly, we are not asking for inclusion, we are demanding co-creation, because ultimately, if the humanitarian system doesn't reach the most marginalized crises, then this is not humanitarian at all. Thank you.